Nobody at my table knew I wrote the rule they were breaking. My daughter-in-law printed an email from my pension fund and set it down next to my coffee. The logo was right. The footer was right, down to the line about this address not being monitored. Disbursement systems migration, 4 to 6 weeks. We apologize for any inconvenience. I read it twice. I believed it for 9 days. Then on the 10th day I was standing at the sink, and I understood what was wrong with it, and it was not one word in it. That fund has never sent a member an email about money. Not once in 51 years. I know because I wrote the rule that says it sends paper. 1999. My initials are still on the revision line in the handbook. My name is Sal Ferraro. I am 74 years old, and for 31 of those years I ran the benefits office of Local 1191. 11 days before that email reached my table, somebody had moved my pension into an account I had never seen. In my name, behind my back. Without telling me, without asking me, and while I was in the house. If somebody in your house has started handling things for you, stay with me. Subscribe to True Deceit Stories, and I will tell you the whole of it. From the first month, it did not arrive to the room where it ended. Let me tell you what the job actually was, because the job is the story. A pension fund is not a bank. It is a promise made by men who are mostly dead to men who are mostly old. And somebody has to sit in an office and keep that promise moving on the 4th of every month. That was me. 31 years. I did not invest anything. I did not decide anything. I processed retirements, survivor elections, disability claims, address changes, direct deposit changes, and the death certificates, which came in at about 1 a week and more in January. Boring is the wrong word for it. Boring is what it looks like from outside. From inside, it is the most serious thing in the world, because a man works 41 years in a mill, and everything he has left is a number in a file, and if the number is wrong, he does not have the years to fix it. Now let me tell you about 1999, because everything that happened to me in September started there. We had a clerk named Rusty Dolan. Nice kid. 26. For 5 months, Rusty redirected the deposits of 4 retired men into an account he controlled. Not all of it. He would take 1 month in 3, so the gap looked like a bank problem, and if anybody called, he would say he was looking into it. 4 men, 5 months. And here is the part that matters. Every one of them noticed. Every single one. But each of them called Rusty, and Rusty was very sorry and very helpful, and the thing they were reporting was being reported to the man doing it. We caught it because a widow in Girard opened a letter that was not meant for her. I was 30 years into nothing and 3 years into that office, and they gave the review to me, and I wrote 4 pages, and one of those pages became a rule. Any change to a member's account generates a letter. First class, to the address of record, within 10 business days. No exceptions, no telephone confirmation, no substitutions. And then I added the part I was proud of, which I want you to hear, because a man in his 50s writing a sentence he thinks is clever does not usually get to find out. The fund does not contact members about money by any means other than the post. Not the telephone. Not, later, email. If it is about your money, it comes on paper. And if it did not come on paper, it is not from us. I trained 3 administrators on that page. My initials are on the revision line. RSF, and the date. And it was not all foresight, whatever I have let people assume since. It was Rusty. It was standing in a hallway, watching a 26-year-old cry, and knowing that 4 men had done exactly the right thing, and it had made no difference at all, because they had reported the fire to the fire. I decided that day that a member should never have to judge whether the person telling them something was honest. The channel should do it for them. Now my family. Marie and I have been married 51 years. She was diagnosed with Parkinson's in the spring of 2023. I am not going to make that into a speech. She is still here, and she is still her, and there are afternoons that are ordinary. There are also things she cannot do that she could do 2 years ago, and the list gets longer at a rate you can almost measure. We have one son, Dominic, 45. Dominic is not a bad man. I will say that again at the end, when you will not want me to. He works long hours, he calls on Sundays, and when Marie was diagnosed, he drove her to every appointment in the first year without being asked once. His weakness is that he wants things to be all right, and he will accept an explanation that makes them all right, rather than check one that might not. He married Rhonda in 2009. Rhonda is a bookkeeper. She is good at it, she is organized, she remembers birthdays, and she is the one who redid the spare room so Marie could get a walker through the door. Their son is Anthony. Ant. He is 19, and he is apprenticing at a barbershop on Vine. Since he was 15, Anthony has cut my hair on the back step, the first Sunday of the month. That started because he needed a head to practice on, and I was the only adult who would sit still and not look in a mirror. I sat there for 2 years while he learned, including some bad ones, and I never once asked to see it before he was finished. We have never talked about it. It is the first Sunday, and I am on the step, and that is all. And I had a cousin named Vincent. Vincent came to us in '58 when his mother died. He was 7, I was 9, and we shared a room for 11 years. We called each other brother for 50 years, and neither of us ever once used the word cousin out loud. In '94, I found a discrepancy in a disability claim. $1,100. It was Vincent's. I reported it. It was my office and my name on the audit, and I was 3 years in and I was frightened, and I have never been able to work out which of those two things made me pick up the telephone. He paid it back. He kept his job. He never spoke to me again. He died in 2016. Marie went in. I stayed in the car outside St. Rocco's an hour and 40 minutes by the dashboard clock, and then I drove us home. The one time in my life I checked a man I loved, it cost me my brother. Keep that in your pocket. You are going to need it later. Rhonda and Dominic moved in March. The reason was medical debt, and it was real. Marie's out-of-pocket in the first 18 months ran past what most people would guess, and Dominic had been quietly covering pieces of it, and by the end of the year his savings were gone. I had 4 bedrooms and 2 of us in them. So they came, and for 6 months it was good, and that stays in. Rhonda cooked on Sundays. Dominic fixed the garage door. Anthony was in and out. The pension did not arrive on the 4th of September. Rhonda was the one who noticed. She was doing the household accounts at the kitchen table, and she looked up and said, "Dad, your pension isn't in." It had been moved 11 days earlier, and I would not find that out until November. See how small that is? The whole thing turns on it, and it looks like nothing at all. For 14 years, I had checked that deposit myself on the 4th of the month. Not because I was worried. Because it is what I did for other men for 31 years, and the habit does not switch off. And that September, somebody else checked it for me and told me the answer, and I said, "Thank you." 2 days later, she brought me the email. It was good. I said that already, and I am saying it again, because people want the forgery to be stupid, and this one was not. The logo was correct. The address block was correct. The disclaimer at the bottom about the mailbox not being monitored was word for word what our vendor used, and I know that because I approved that vendor in 2014. Disbursement systems migration. 4 to 6 weeks. We apologize for any inconvenience, and thank you for your patience. And I believed it for 9 days. Those 9 days are the only part of this that still gets at me. I did not believe it because I was old or confused. I believed it because a migration is a real thing, because our vendor really had been talking about a platform change, and because the person who handed it to me had made me a cup of coffee. The failure was not in my head. It was in the fact that the paper was warm from the printer in my own house. On the 11th day, the aide went to 2 hours. Beverly Tate comes for Marie. She had been coming 4 hours a day, 1 to 5, since the previous autumn. She does the exercises. She does lunch. She is there for the afternoon, which is the hard part of the day. Rhonda told me the agency had cut the authorization. She said it was a funding thing. She was furious about it, and she was fighting them. And Beverly started leaving at 1. Marie is alone from 1 o'clock. I am there, but I am 74, and I cannot get her up off a floor, and both of us know it, and neither of us says it. In October, I heard her say it. She was on the back porch, on the telephone, to her sister. And the kitchen window was open about 4 inches, because I had been boiling potatoes, and I was at the sink. She was not being cruel. That is the thing I keep having to explain to people. She was talking about the household the way you talk about a chore. She said, "No, it's fine. It's not like he even checks. It's not like he even checks." 31 years I checked. I checked for men I never met on the 4th of every month, and checked their survivors and their service credit and their addresses. And I caught a clerk who thought the same thing about 4 retired men in 1999. I stood at that sink with a pot in my hand, and I did not move until she came in. Now, at this point, I did the sensible thing. I called the fund. I dialed a number I dialed for 31 years. I know the woman at the front desk. I know the building. I know that if you stand in the corridor outside the mailroom, you can still smell the toner. And I did not get past the front desk. She was polite. She said there was a representative on file for my account, and inquiries had to come through the representative. I said, "Since when?" She said, "Since September." And that sentence did something to me the fraud had not. Not the theft, the sentence. For 31 years that counter had me on the far side of it. I have said a version of that sentence myself, hundreds of times, to sons and daughters and to men who were angry. And I said it because it was the rule, and the rule protects people. And now it was pointed at me, and it worked perfectly. That is when I stopped and went back to the email. I sat at the table on a Tuesday morning with the printout, and I read it a 4th time, looking for the mistake in the wording, and there is no mistake in the wording. And then I stopped looking at the words. That fund does not email members about money. Not because it is old-fashioned. Because I wrote a page in 1999 that says it will not, and that page is still in the handbook, and 3 administrators have been trained on it, and one of them is the one running the office now. A forger can copy a logo. He can copy a footer. He can copy a signature well enough that you would sign next to it and not see the difference. He cannot copy 51 years of a habit he does not know exists. And he cannot copy it because it is not written on anything he can get hold of. It is not on the statement. It is not on the website. It is not in any letter the fund has ever sent out. It lives on page 9 of a handbook in a filing cabinet on Bidwell Avenue, and the only people who know it are the ones who were trained on it. That is the whole asymmetry, and it is the only advantage an old man has left in this. Everything about an institution that can be photographed can be faked. What cannot be faked is what it has never done, because nobody outside knows the shape of the whole. The email was not wrong. The email was impossible. And once I saw that, the second thing came about 4 seconds behind it, and the second thing was worse. If my direct deposit had been changed, the fund would have sent a letter to the address of record within 10 business days. I did not get a letter. There are only 2 reasons a member does not get that letter. Either it was never sent, which means somebody inside skipped a step, or it was sent, and the address of record is not my address. Both of those are somebody's fault, and neither of them is a thing I would have to prove. I would just have to get one person to look. I talked to Dominic that night. On the back step where the bocce court is. I told him, the fund does not send emails about money. I said it twice. He said, Pop, that's probably an old rule. I said, I wrote it. And he said, well, things change. They've probably got a new system. That's what migration is. Do you see it? He used the fake document to explain away the evidence that the document was fake. I asked him how long it would take to telephone the fund himself and ask one question. 4 minutes? 5? He said he would do it that week. It had been 9 weeks. He never did. This is where people expect me to say he was in on it. He was not. He was tired. He had a wife who was handling it. Handling it is a very restful thing to be told. The 14th of November was a Thursday. Beverly left at 1, the way she had since September. At 2:10, Marie tried to get from the chair in the front room to the kitchen, and she went down at the corner of the table. She was on the floor for 50 minutes. I was at the hardware store on Route 62, buying screening for the bocce court. I have turned that over, more than anything else in this, and I am not going to perform it for you. Fractured wrist. And the skin of her forearm opened on the edge of the table, and at 72, with the medication she is on, that took until February to close. That is where this stopped being about money. Up to the 14th of November, I had been reasonable. I had been careful and correct and slow, and I had been proceeding the way a man proceeds who spent 31 years being fair to everybody in a file. And I sat in the emergency room at Rennick General at 9 at night and understood that being reasonable had a cost, and the cost was being paid by somebody else. Every week I spent doing this properly was another week of 1 o'clock. On the 18th, I asked the fund for a copy of my own file. The woman at the front desk was kind about it. She said certainly, and she said it would be posted to the address on record. I said, would you read me the address on record? There was a pause, and she said she was not able to do that, which is its own answer, and it is the answer I wrote that rule to produce. So I knew, not the street, but I knew the address on file was not this house, which meant there had been 2 changes, not 1. The deposit and the address. And 2 changes mean 2 letters that should have come here and did not. So I laid it out the way I would have laid out a file, which is the only thing I am any good at. 1. The fund does not email members about money, by a written rule, with my initials on it. 2. A change of deposit generates a letter to the address of record within 10 business days. I received none. 3. The address of record is not my address, which the fund would not read out to me. 4. There is a representative on my account, filed in September, that I did not authorize. Not one of those is an accusation. Every one of them is a question that an institution has to answer. And that is the trick. The only useful thing I know. Do not walk in with a story about your daughter-in-law. Walk in with 4 things that can be checked by somebody whose job it is to check them. Now I have to tell you the part I like least. I lied to her. In January, I told Rhonda I had decided to make the representative arrangement official because it had been a mess, and she was doing the work anyway, and it should be tidy. She was so pleased, and I had not expected that at all. Not calculating. Pleased the way you are pleased when somebody finally agrees with you. And I said, bring the email as well. I want counsel to see what they sent us, because I am going to complain about this migration properly. And she said, absolutely, I will bring everything. I asked for the meeting at the fund office and not at the house. I said it was so the trustees could see Marie was real. The 19th of February, a Tuesday. The Sunday before, Anthony cut my hair on the back step. First Sunday of the month, in February, in the cold, and he did it out there the way he has since he was 15. Neither of us said one word about Tuesday. He finished, and he brushed my collar off, and he said, all right, Pop. That is all, he said. The conference room on Bidwell Avenue seats 8, and there were 11 of us. Me, Marie, in her chair, with her wrist still strapped. Anthony, who drove her. Dominic. Rhonda. Karen Prisco, who runs the office now and who I trained in 2006. The fund's counsel, a woman named Adele Voss. 2 trustees. A supervisor from the aid agency. And Curtis Van, the agency scheduler, who had been told the meeting was about scheduling. Rhonda came in with a folder and she was magnificent. She was calm, she was organized, she had brought everything. She put the printed email on the table and slid it across and said, "This is what the fund sent us in September." And Adele Voss picked it up and looked at it for a while. I did not say anything. This is the part where I had to not say anything, and it was the hardest thing I have ever done sitting down. Then Anthony said, "Excuse me. Can I ask something?" 19 years old, in a room with 2 trustees and a lawyer, and he had not been told he was not allowed. He said, "Can somebody read out what the fund actually mailed to my grandfather's address in September?" Adele Voss looked at Karen, and Karen looked at her file for a long time, and she said, "Nothing was generated." Anthony said, "Is that normal?" And Karen said, "No." Then Anthony asked the second one. He asked it looking at the lawyer, not at Rhonda. He said, "Has this fund ever emailed a member about a payment?" And Adele Voss said, "Never." She did not say it dramatically. She said it the way a lawyer says a thing she has just confirmed on her telephone under the table. Never. And that was the room. Nobody stood up and nobody shouted. Rhonda said, "Well, obviously I received it," and started to say something about a spam folder and stopped. Because there were 11 people in that room, and every one of them was somebody she had spent 5 months managing. Her husband, her son, her father-in-law, her mother-in-law in a wheelchair with a strapped wrist, her own scheduler sitting 4 feet away, who had just worked out what meeting he was actually in. Anthony told me afterwards that he watched her realize it, that she had never once had the advantage she thought she had, not from the first day, because the one document she made herself was the only one the fund could disprove without leaving the building. I have thought about why that room broke her when a police station would not have. I think it is because she had told 11 different versions to 11 different people, and she had never had to hold them all up at the same time. Now, what you stayed for, they got nothing. Not 1 month of it stayed gone. Curtis Van went first, in March, and he went because the agency's own audit reached him before anybody reached her. He had been billing 4 hours and staffing 2 and splitting it, and the visit log he signed is what made the hours provable, and he gave her up in about the time it takes to be shown a document. Rhonda was charged in April and took a plea in November. 4 years. She fought it until the visit log came in, and then she did not fight it anymore. The pension was restored and back paid in 6 weeks. The fund did not argue for a day, because the missing letters were their own failure, and they knew it before I did. Karen Prisco was not charged and did not lose her job. She had accepted a change of address on a form with no member signature, in a batch with 30 others, and she skipped the confirmation letter, and she did not take a cent. She was moved off member services. The confirmation step now needs a second signature, and that is not tidy, and I am not going to pretend it is. I trained her. In 2006, in a room with that handbook open. I do not know whether the rule failed or I did. I have had a year to decide, and I have not. Beverly Tate came back to 4 hours in March, and she still comes. She sat with Marie for 50 minutes in that emergency room while I did the paperwork, and she was not being paid for it, and she has never once mentioned it. Dominic was not charged. He signed nothing, took nothing, and he did not know. He also had 9 weeks to make a 4-minute telephone call and did not make it. He lives in an apartment on Ohio Avenue now. He comes on Sundays. He does the storm windows. I said at the start he is not a bad man, and I said I would say it again when you did not want me to, so here it is. He is not a bad man. He is a man who was offered a version of things in which everything was all right, and he took it, and the price of that was paid by his mother on a kitchen floor. He knows. We have never discussed it, and we never will. It is in the room every Sunday, and neither of us picks it up. Anthony finished his apprenticeship in October. He has a chair at the shop on Vine now. First Sunday of the month, back step. He has never once mentioned that room, or the two questions, or what he did at 19 years old, in front of two trustees and a lawyer. I have never thanked him for it either. If I said it out loud, we would both have to look at it. So I sit on the step, and he works, and I do not look in a mirror until he is finished. The court is done. I screened and leveled it by hand through October in the evenings, because the fund would not talk to me, and there is only so much sitting a man can do. 59 feet by 10. Crushed oyster shell over stone dust, which is not traditional and which is better, and the boards are cedar because I had the cedar. I finished it in April. Sal Cirillo died in 2021. Pete Mandarino is in Arizona with his daughter. The Rizzo brothers will not drive at night anymore, and there is no other time in summer worth playing. So it is a proper court. Level to a 1/4 inch across 59 feet, and the best thing these hands have made. And there is nobody left to play on it. I used to try to arrange those two facts, so one of them softened the other. They do not do that. They just sit side by side, which at 74 turns out to be how most things sit. Marie comes out and sits at the end of it in the evening, and I roll, and I walk down, and I roll back. Now the part that is yours. Everybody tells you to look for the mistake. The spelling, the odd address, the logo that is slightly wrong. That is the wrong thing to look for, and it will get worse, because copying is the one thing that keeps getting cheaper. Here is what a forger cannot copy. He cannot copy what an institution never does. Every bank, every fund, every agency you deal with has a fixed way of reaching you about money. One of them only writes, one of them only calls, and will never email. One will never ask you for anything by text, ever, under any circumstances. That is not a detail. That is the strongest fact you own about them, because it is a habit 50 years deep, and the person forging the letter has no idea it exists. The email that took my pension was perfect. Every pixel of it was right. It arrived by a road that fund has never once driven down in 51 years, and that is all that was wrong with it, and that was enough. So here is the thing to do, and it takes one telephone call. Ring your pension, your bank, whoever sends you money, on the number printed on your own statement, not the number on the message. Never the number on the message. And ask them one question: how do you contact me about my money, and what will you never use? Write the answer down and put it in the drawer with the statement. Then anything that arrives by any other road is answered before it gets here, and you will not have to be clever at 7 in the morning with a cup of coffee going cold and somebody standing at your shoulder being helpful. 4 men in 1999 all noticed and all reported it to the man doing it. I wrote a rule so that nobody would ever have to judge the person who was telling them. 26 years later, that rule was the only thing standing between my wife and that kitchen floor, and it held because it was written down where a 19-year-old could ask about it out loud. Not $1 of it went. Every month was back paid. Rhonda will be paying restitution long after she is out, and Curtis Van will never work a care schedule again. And it was all decided by a habit nobody thought to write down until a clerk made me write it down. She got what she deserved, and I am not going to be delicate about saying so. Marie was on that floor for 50 minutes, and the woman who put her there is where she should be, and I have not lost 1 hour of sleep over it. Make the call this week. If this stayed with you, hit like and subscribe to True Deceit Stories. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from today. There will be a new one next week.